Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I think we're going to make a start. My name is Judita Jankovic, and I'm working at ICAO at the Office of Evaluation and Internal Audit. And here with me, I have also Anton Bilaver, who is the Strategic Planning Officer working at the Office of the Secretary General. So I'm very pleased to start the second webinar of UNEG. As you know, it's part of a series of webinars that UNEG has organized. And the title of this and theme of this webinar is the role and commitment of senior decision makers in evaluation. So I should just say that, the focus of this webinar is on key message 2 of the UNEG study, which is that the support of decision makers is key, and so is their commitment to implementing the recommendations. Before we start and introduce ourselves, I should just do a couple of marketing announcements that I was asked to do by Xenia, one of the organizers. And this is to say that after this webinar, we have 2 others coming up. In 2 weeks' time, on March 29th, we will have Jeff presenting what makes meaningful stakeholder engagement in evaluation. And then in April, mid-April, specifically April the 19th, we will have IFAD talking about routing evaluation independence in the context of multilateral development organizations. I should also say that this webinar is being recorded, and so it will be available later on the UNEG website. We'll also provide the PowerPoint presentation that we will have. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. So I've been working at the Office of Evaluation and Internal Audit for the past 3.5 years. We're a very small office. We used to be 2 evaluators, and currently I'm the single evaluator in this office. We're co-located with internal audit, and so we're a very small office, and we conduct project, program, and corporate evaluations mostly. We have an evaluation policy which has been endorsed in 2014. Prior to my work experience here, I've been at the Food and Agriculture Organization for the past 7 years before coming here. I should also say that ICAO is it stands for International Civil Aviation Organization, and it's based in Montreal. So prior to my work experience in FAO, which is based in Rome, I've also worked in the private sector in market research. So I will now allow Anton to say a few words about himself. We were colleagues, I guess, in Rome when he was working at the World Food Program. Anton?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. As Judita said, I'm Anton Bilaver. I'm the Strategic Planning Officer here in the Office of the Secretary General. So my portfolio, or the portfolio of our unit, which is a relatively small unit, is performance management, risk management, strategic planning, business planning, and a number of smaller roles. Prior to joining ICAO, I've been here now 6 years. Prior to that, I was in the World Food Program from 1999 to the year 2010. So I've been around the UN for a while now. I will hand it off back to you, Judita.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anton. Okay, so the objectives of this webinar. First of all, actually, before the objectives, I just wanted to mention that the structure of this webinar will be an introductory a presentation by myself, followed by a focused discussion with Anton. We will have, or I will have, a couple of questions for him. And after that, you will also have a chance to ask us questions. Feel free to do that during the presentation. I'm also monitoring the chat option here, so you can write to us, or I believe you can also pose questions as well in speaking. So feel free to do that. It's planned that we have an hour and a half. I think, let's see how we go. I think that's plenty of time for this. Okay, so the objectives of the webinar, they're really, as I said earlier on, primarily it is to disseminate the key message of the UNEG study on evaluation use in the UN system, and specifically key message 2, which is that the support of senior decision makers is key, and so is their commitment to implementing the recommendations. So that's the starting point for this webinar. And we will use a case study, an evaluation that I've conducted. It was actually my first evaluation as I joined ICAO, and I started it in 2012. Using this evaluation and looking at what happened after the evaluation completed, we'll also see how the role of champions is very important, and how the impact of evaluations can be supported, enhanced through these champions. And of course, lastly, we also wanted to provide some perspectives other than the evaluation perspective, and this is why we're very happy to have Anton here with us. Obviously, I mean, his perspective is from the programming side, or rather the strategic planning side, as he has a role in facilitating the implementation of performance management at ICAO. Okay. So before I go to tell you a little bit about the evaluation that we're using as a case example, I just wanted to recall one of the diagrams that summarized key message 2 in the UNEG study. So this is a very neat diagram. You may not be able to actually see the font, the character, the letters actually, but this is just broadly to outline what mechanisms are at play in terms of evaluation use. So you can see that we've got senior management that supports evaluation. We also have recommendations that are accurate, feasible, and relevant, and all of these other factors that ensure that there's more instrumental use of evaluation assured. Of course, this is a very neat diagram that is very evaluation centric. So what I wanted to say here is that that our example, as you will see, shows that the impact of the evaluation in influencing organizational change is not necessarily so evaluation-centric, linear, or clear, even at times. So the mechanisms at play in our example are very much embedded in the organizational context, in stakeholder involvement, and the processes that happened after the evaluation. So this is in fact, some of the elements of the under the summary of use factors in the UNEG report, and this is neatly described in paragraph 34 of the report, if you'd want to have a look at that later on. Okay, so some of the key evaluation messages from our case. Here they are. I will not be going into too much detail on the evaluation results per se and outcomes, because we want to focus more on evaluation use, so more on the processes, how the evaluation was used to promote change. So just very briefly, to provide you with some context, the evaluation of results-based management at ICAO was carried out by our office, by myself. So it was a centralized evaluation, and it was carried out from November 2012 until May 2013. In terms of the evaluation period, it included the period from 2004 to 2012. So it looked at, progress of ICAO in moving towards results-based management during this period. And the purpose was both for accountability and for learning. So the evaluation assessed the coherence, relevance, efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability of results-based management processes. The methodology involved a desk study, an analysis, an organization-wide survey, and interviews with senior management, with staff, and with council members. Council is our governing body. Okay, so the momentum for results-based management started in 2004. When the Joint Inspection Unit's benchmarking framework for results-based management was issued. And so the organization was requested to establish a more systematic planning process that would drive the evolution of the budget. So the evaluation found that while there was this initial momentum, it was not sustained. So a decade later, ICAO has only partially met the JIU benchmarks. And while some elements of performance management existed at the time of the evaluation, there was no organization-wide framework. So there was no policy, guideline, structure, accountability function, or reporting on performance management. And so, the practice was inconsistent as a result. Okay, now in terms of the evaluation recommendations, at the time when the evaluation was completed and the recommendations were issued, there were few that were accepted. So, a few of the key ones were in fact accepted, and that is, for example, to establish an organization-wide performance management framework, to provide training, raise awareness, and develop organizational capacity on the performance management framework, and to scale up a current performance management system to report on results. The ones that were not accepted at the time were to strengthen the strategic planning function, and to conduct systematically an organizational analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats at the organizational level. And another one that was requiring or asking to link individual to programmatic and organizational planning of results. Okay, now concerning some of these recommendations that were not accepted, there was awareness that, obviously some were complex to implement, such as the linking of individual to programmatic and organizational planning of results, and costly change was required, and some implied loss of power and control. Now, In terms of the context, our context during and after the evaluation, and particularly I would highlight after the evaluation, I think Anton will be able to speak to that perhaps more than myself. I think these three elements were key. So from the start of the evaluation, we had, or there was an interest in the evaluation by ICAO's governing bodies. And these were for two reasons primarily. One was because there was an increasing demand for accountability and value for money. It was in this context that the evaluation was starting at. And another one was simply because, previously, actually there was a new evaluator came on board. That was myself. So the expectations were high. The expectations were that more evaluations will be produced. So this was the very first evaluation I was conducting. So there was a lot of interest because of that too. Then another related factor was that, it was very clear early on that there were, perhaps not that many, but perhaps it takes only 2 champions that were outside of the evaluation unit. So these were 2 council members that were part of the evaluation, so they were interviewed as part of the evaluation. And they showed quite a lot of enthusiasm and interest into the topic and the evaluation. And this was because they had familiarity with results-based management in terms of their previous roles in their civil aviation authorities. And they had past experience, in one of them at least, in terms of actually setting up a performance management in their previous positions. So, there were a few developments after the evaluation, which Anton will speak about, which set in motion the organizing of these awareness-raising activities. And they also provided some in-kind support to performance management. And then lastly, you see that we also have support from the top to help drive change. And again, Anton will speak more to this. We did have a change in leadership after the evaluation finished. And so we've seen, or I have seen, some positive changes following that. Okay. Okay, and actually now it's very timely that we have now the focus discussion where I think Anton will be able to expand a bit on this past slide. So we have, or I have prepared some questions to him, and here they are. They're all immediately shown. So I think what we'll do, we'll just have this discussion, and as I said, feel free to ask some follow-up questions, or wait until we have this discussion, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. So Anton, thanks again very much for being present and for participating in this. So I've provided some few introductory words, and I think it would be very useful to hear from your perspective in terms of, how this performance management started to develop after or in parallel to the evaluation. So I'd like to hear from your experience what stimulated this renewed commitment to performance management at ICAO. That's our first question.
Thanks, Judita. So The renewed commitment in performance management in ICAO, I think, is directly attributable to our new Secretary General, Dr. Feng Liu. She took up her position in August and almost immediately spearheaded the drafting of an organization-wide business plan for the upcoming triennium of 2017-2019. And that business plan included expected results, outcomes, and output level KPIs, which was fairly new for this organization. And she's also set a target for the establishment of an ICAO corporate performance management framework by the end of this calendar year, 2016, which will look at and report on performance management from a corporate level and cascade on down to the unit level. As Judita had said, the initial idea of performance management started about 3 years ago with members of the ICAO Council. So I'll give you a little bit of a back brief on our council. It's our governing body, as Judita had said, and it's permanent in nature, which means it means that the members have offices in our building here. So we're one of the few, I think, organizations that has a resident council, which makes for interesting work sometimes. And there are currently 36 members on that council. And as I previously stated, the council requested that ICAO be more active in performance management, and this was attributed to that initial evaluation on RBM. And they asked that the organization come up with KPIs for the main activities that it was undertaking. And we did that. Since then, however, as Judita had previously said, we've got a new Secretary General, and she's greatly expanded this.
Okay. So I guess this leads us to the second question, which is quite related. In your view, who are the current champions of performance management? I hear that, it's the Secretary General, and, how do they make a difference, and what is it about them that makes them influential?
So, as you say, yeah, it is the current Secretary General, and I think she makes the difference in the fact that she's made performance management a cornerstone of her leadership style. So she's working diligently with her senior managers, which we have a number of bureau directors who are D2 level, to inculcate performance management as well as risk and accountability as corporate values for all ICAO staff. So it's really from the top down. By holding herself and her senior managers accountable, I firmly believe that she does set the tone sort of for the rank and file members of the organization. In essence, it's really leadership by example. So the unit that I work for, which has performance management and risk as part of its portfolio, we used to be part of finance, which I thought it was kind of strange when I first came here, but that's where we were. Soon after taking on her role as Secretary General, Dr. Liu moved us to the Office of the Secretary General to ensure that performance management and risk sort of had the necessary organization-wide weight and importance, and was really viewed as an organization-wide endeavor, not specifically endeavor coming from finance. So I think, just to summarize that, I believe really the Secretary General, she's the key champion here, and her senior managers who have bought onto this are sort of the supporting champions in this process.
Okay. And what do you see as limitations or constraints in developing it further? Performance management.
I think the key constraint in this organization, specifically because this is an organization that has been doing its work the way it has been doing its work for, I would say, 30 years. And coming from World Food Program here, I found that there was a completely different way of doing work, and they had really been set in their ways, really tied to aviation. And I think the key limit, the biggest constraint here is going to be change and the challenge of change. And how are we going to overcome this? And I think it's going to take a bit of time, probably some trust and transparency on the part of the staff. And for staff to see that performance management will have a positive effect on their work, it won't necessarily be an added addition to their work. And so I think in the end, it's that change management approach. That's going to be how do we change the culture of the organization?
Yeah. Okay. And what about the evaluation? Do you think that it made a difference? And if not, why not? If yes, how? And how could it have made more of a difference?
I think, yes, it definitely made a difference. And I think you brought up a valid point when you said, you'd recently come onto the organization and you were sort of the new evaluation officer, and there was a lot of interest in this evaluation on RBM. And that evaluation had sort of been scheduled, I don't want to say a year before you got here, but it had been in the pipeline for a while. I'd been hearing people had been coming and say, hey, we're going to do an evaluation of results-based management. And I said, great, all right. Yeah. I'm ready whenever you're ready. And so I think what I saw there was that it raised awareness among council members, that you had said, and those council members then came to, they realized that within ICAO there existed a unit that worked on planning, performance, management, and risk. And they really hadn't known that we existed. And so that sort of percolated some of these ideas up, and council really started pushing for more. And I firmly believe that the evaluation started that initial conversation in council, and that eventually led to the establishment of initial sort of activity-based KPIs, which I believe were, I don't say rudimentary, but it was a beginning process, and it was a good start for it, and it was the first step in the process. And so I think that evaluation was, in essence, the trigger for all of this. Mm-hmm. It brought it on the radar of the governing body.
Yes, just to add to that, I recall when I arrived and kind of got this evaluation to be my first one to conduct. So when I looked into the history of the request, I've realized that, in fact, yes, it has been postponed for a number of years, and so I got this hot potato in my hand, and it was very interesting to interact with council members and to see, that, to realize that at least two of them were very much interested, and I think they were very appreciative of actually being evaluation participants, because they did feel that they can contribute, as I said, because of their past experience in their previous roles, and because of familiarity with performance management. So, So it's interesting for me to also see how things are moving, past the evaluation, and especially after it has completed, and especially with the change in leadership, where, I see some positive progress being made as a result of this change in leadership. And as Anton has mentioned, I think that giving more visibility to this, portfolio and to the strategic planning function, which is also a small one. We are a very small organization, so I think that has made a difference as well. Now, maybe just a follow-up question. In terms of the performance management, this is not on the slide, the performance management indicators. So I'm aware that currently there's a formulation, or maybe perhaps that process has finished, of corporate KPIs. So you mentioned that initially you started with activity KPIs, and now there's also corporate KPIs. So if you can just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, that process actually started, I want to say, over a year ago, and the idea was that that the council, our governing body, would come up with some what we deemed high-level corporate KPIs to sort of assess the corporate performance of the organization. And it's been an ongoing process. So now there's been a lot of, they've pared them down, I think, to about 15 corporate KPIs, and we recently had a workshop where KPIs were one of the components that was discussed. And so now they're in the stage where they're trying, there's again 36 members, so everybody has an opinion, where they're trying to streamline and come up with I want to say a handful of corporate KPIs, and then they're working with the Secretariat, us, to make sure that they are both measurable, realistic sort of, and that the targets are agreed upon by both. So it's not finalized yet, and if I'm not mistaken, we will have an initial sort of, if you will, proposed draft of those KPIs to be approved in our upcoming session of council, which will be in about 2 months. So we're getting close to identifying those high-level corporate KPIs for the organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you, Anton. This is really what we had, the questions that we had in mind. Now, I realize we have quite a lot of time still left. We'd like to ask if there are any questions from the audience. Feel free to pose those questions now. I think you can use both the chat option, or you can just speak up. I think you need to unmute your microphone and you'd be able to be heard. So I'm seeing that we have a message coming up or a question coming up from Brooke Boyer. Okay, we're still receiving a message from Brooke. Also, feel free to comment in terms of performance management experiences in your organizations, and if you had evaluations of these and how it went really, or how do you see, are there any similarities in terms of the process use, and or are there some distinct experiences? Okay, so we have received a message from Brooke Boyer, and he is asking, has the senior level support helped get line management support for the implementation of results-based management or performance management following the evaluation? So I think that
I'll take
Anton.
that. Yeah, I think I could say a qualified yes. I think it's still a process. Anything that's top down, it's going to take a while for people to feel comfortable with. But I think there's the interaction with the line managers has been pretty good, and they've been they were very active in identifying the targets and the KPIs when we started breaking down programmatic level issues. So I would say yes. Have they completely drank the Kool-Aid, and are they firm believers? Not yet, but initially it's a yes.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'd just like to comment. I mean, I remember the experience we had in terms of, this change management when I was at the Food and Agriculture Organization. So there was a very huge investment in terms of results-based management, and this was following an independent external evaluation of the entire organization. And of course, I mean, I think this does not compare with the the humble little evaluation that I've conducted here, because of course they had in terms of their scope, in terms of the time they had available, the resources. It was a huge undertaking. They had a huge team of evaluators. They had a huge field presence in terms of the evaluation, etc. So, but in any case, there too was a very big interest by the governing body in this evaluation. It was not only about results-based management, it was of the entire organization, but RBM was a very important component of it. And so I guess my point is that they've invested quite a lot into the change management component when it came to implementing those recommendations. And so I was part of that. I mean, I was there. I mean, I was part of, not the ones that were, facilitating the change, but the ones that part of the staff that was recipients of that, change management effort. So I could see, the dynamics and how enthusiastic initially people were. And then it kind of slightly whittled down, I have to say, over the years. And I think that component is perhaps not really present here. I mean, in the sense that there's no investment of that scale done at ICAO in terms of change management per se.
Yeah, I agree. I think we haven't done an investment in change management. The change management sort of the initial forays have been all internal, but we haven't made a sort of corporate push and have had that. We haven't done that yet.
Hmm. I mean, I'm aware that there are these leadership training programs through which there is a bit of that, but I mean, I think that's fairly small scale and for limited recipients. So I haven't seen an organization-wide investment. And do you foresee that? Or maybe that's not a fair question.
It's hard to say because we are a organization that is primarily funded by assessed contributions. We're in the middle of a budget cycle right now, a budget negotiation cycle right now. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. So.
Yeah. So to be seen, I guess. Okay, now do we have any other questions from the audience? Also in terms of, not just questions, but comments, in terms of performance management processes in your organization, and if there was an evaluation that looked at performance management. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can.
Hi, this is Brooke. It's easier to perhaps speak on the microphone rather than typing. I had a question really in terms of how you work to get colleagues in the organization on board to really integrate performance management and RBM. It's one thing to say that you're doing it. It's another thing to actually practice it in a day in, day out basis. And I wondered if you confronted challenges along those lines at ICAO.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we are actually. The first step was we drafted what was an RBM sort of orientation guide, which had not existed in the organization. It was a pretty straightforward, easy to use guide to help people come understand RBM, and then to use that to help them to plan their activities. And so currently, I'd mentioned before, we're working on the 2017-2019 budget, and we've created a business plan. And in that business plan, there are operating plans. And in the operating plans, you have expected results, let's say, for the strategic objectives, which our bureaus are more or less defined that way. And then for all the supporting implementation strategies, your HRs, your ICTs, et cetera. So you have expected results, you have outcome level, KPIs at the outcome level. And then you have key activities lower level, and then there you have as well KPIs on the output level. So the idea being that these operating plans are what you're going to sort of mimic your work after. You've created, let's say, a key activity, and in that key activity there are going to be a number of tasks and subtasks, and that's going to be in essence your work program as a unit, as a section, and then as an individual. Now we haven't aligned the individual work plan like a PACE type of thing with that yet. I know there's talk of doing that, but they're not formally aligned. But however, if you were to sort of it's almost like playing with Legos. If you start putting them together, you see that they are aligned. So your PACE aligns with the unit, which aligns with the section, which aligns with the bureau, which aligns with your strategic objective, and the same goes for all. And so the idea being, we've set out these plans, we've agreed to them, and now we're going to be tracking. Each unit's going to be tracking what they're doing and how they're doing it according to the plans they've set out. And of course, we'd also like to have the plan is to, by the end of this year, to have a tool that allows the various tracking of this to take place, at those levels. So like, the unit level, your unit line managers see it. It moves up to, let's say, and at the bureau level, you have a director of a bureau overseeing it, and then that's forwarded on up to like the Secretary General, and eventually you will have those corporate KPIs embedded in there for the council. So there'll be different levels where people view it. But we're at that sort of. I would still say we're at the beginning stage of the process. Maybe we're still at the stage where people, I think they're comfortable what they've agreed to for 2017, and it's going to be interesting to see how well we're well we go about sticking to those plans and tracking and reporting on those plans.
And maybe if I can add, I mean, in terms of the experiences and practices and attitudes, the organization-wide survey that was administered as part of the evaluation looked at that, and it was a kind of a baseline survey. So in fact, it was found that it's inconsistently practiced. It's not really practiced because, again, because of that at the time lack of a performance management framework and commitment by the top. And there was a lot of actually there was lack of familiarity with the concept, and those that were familiar were saying that it's not being that there aren't any results-based practices. So I think that can be used, and I'm aware also that we have these staff surveys periodically, which also I think touch upon on some of these issues. So it's kind of like a as if you're taking a pulse of the organization periodically. It doesn't happen every year, but once in every 3 years, I guess every triennium. And so these things, the managerial aspects are looked at in these surveys. So I think that would provide another important component to assessing or having an overview on how things are going. So not just the presence of these systems and elements, but also in terms of what do staff think and perceive and practice in their everyday work. So thank you for your follow-up question. I hope that we were useful in responding. Are there any others that would like to pose a question? Okay, well, it looks like there are no other questions. We'd want to thank you for your participation. We hope it was useful. Feel free to contact us, if you have a follow-up question or comment. You have our emails there. And thank you very much again, and have a great day ahead or evening.